Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Enterprise AI isn't just a tool, it's the heartbeat of smart organizations like yours, helping to reinvent work to deliver higher growth, more customers, and better experiences. Join us as we discover how AI-powered work orchestration and automation is making things better for everyone: customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Brad Hairston here. Welcome to Transform Now. My guest today is Damian Lewandowski, an expert at McKinsey Company and an AI practitioner. Damian has been on the podcast before. He talked with us about the emergence of generative AI at the time. Today, he and I are going to talk about his thoughts on how companies can more effectively approach agentic capabilities. Well, Damian, welcome back. Why don't you provide a brief intro of yourself, since it's been a while, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. Great to see you again, Brad. So I'm Damian. I'm an expert, 8 years at McKinsey, currently in the Miami office. I've done almost all of my career at McKinsey with AI solutions, AI deployments, product builds, productivity improvements. And the last, I want to say, about 6 months has been very intense into the agentic capabilities, whether it's strategy for the next couple of years, whether it's blueprinting products and solutions, adjusting operating models. So I'm happy to be here and share a little bit of what we learned in the last couple of months.
Damian, you wrote a really interesting piece recently that challenged the way that most companies are approaching agentic. So I'd love to dive into that with you. If you look at the world of agentic and how companies are wrapping their brains around it, what's one risk or blind spot in today's agentic AI conversation that you think people should be paying more attention to?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. But let me maybe start with just giving my definition of what this really is and what it isn't.
Okay.
I see a lot of practitioners, a lot of executives have their own versions of it with some commonalities, some differences. The big part that I always encourage people to think about is that this entire agentic AI hype word and another buzzword has been, it's not an evolution of like Lego blocks. It's just a different composition of architectures and models. And the big hype is really around the models being better and surpassing the human baseline of benchmarks. Right? So how I tend to think about it, there's still 3 main categories of a lot of automation technologies, right? There's your traditional AI, your RPAs, your symbolic rule-based statistical inferences, and so forth. It's not like that's becoming obsolete. It's just good for a different purpose with different ROI, right? For a specific workload. The second one that we talked about last time is this Gen AI, which is basically foundation models, aware outputs. You have pre-trained models, so you can process unstructured data and produce outputs. Great. A lot of side things came out of that, like you'll see co-pilots and so forth. But arguably, as you enter the third bucket of agentic AI, this is all about being goal-driven. So you're able to leverage a lot of these models and architectures to plan, make decisions, you integrate memory and loops, and ultimately execute still fairly limited amounts of actions, but you're able to execute. Now, arguably, with this definition, you could say a co-pilot is a form of an agent, because certain co-pilots out there, you give it a task, you give it an instruction, it goes, executes, and it comes back with what you have asked it to do. So this is where a lot of folks still say, oh, it's just Gen AI, it's not AI agent. But I think AI agents kind of became an evolution or a spectrum of different types of goal-enabled execution. So with that, to your question around the biggest blind spot, I think it's really following the hype. Like I said, at the end of the day, these AI agents or agentic AI is just a composition of an architecture binded by a whole bunch of models. You have a model that first understands your request. You have a whole bunch of models and frameworks, right? That then decompose your request, orchestrate your request, and they do some sort of evaluation loops and tap into new models, whether it's like specialized models for vision, depending on the task, depending on the architecture, right? You have some access to tools and APIs. You have an emergence of these MCP protocols and A2A protocols in case you're spinning different types of narrow agents. And you enable them to tie to other agents, to external databases, to internal databases, to any knowledge. And that can take many different forms, many different flavors, depending on if you custom build or you buy off the shelf. And I feel that a lot of companies think it's just like an anthropomorphosis of a digital worker already. And eventually you will. If you noticed the operator from GPT, it's phenomenal. But by the time that becomes into half of an employee or a fraction of employee, it will take a lot of time. So I would just encourage a lot of folks to just understand this is still a prediction machine. It's still a bunch of models working together to execute an action. There is a huge risk it will do something wrong. Although hallucination rates are dropping, there's still a big risk there. And most importantly, it's which decision do you enable these agents to make? There's early pilots. There's already been a lot of screw ups where some agents were deployed, let's say in the customer service function, they were supposed to save customers, but the rate that they were giving out or flexible to make a decision whether you get X rate or Y rate or nothing for 3 months actually like created a very bad P&L result. So it's like, do you enable these agents to automatically assess the customer and give a probationary 3-month period to save you? Or do you still want a human to approve some of these things, given that if you do it at scale, you can really lose some serious money? And yeah, it's a decision and it's a design choice you can take, and it can take a lot of different directions.
Yeah. So you see a lot of companies buying into the hype, as you said, and maybe not thinking more clearly about where agentic really fits. With generative AI, we certainly saw that same thing where companies were excited about it. They couldn't necessarily find the right use case for it. Is that also part of it with agentic when they think about more goal-oriented agents that have a level of autonomy? I mean, that's a pretty powerful capability, but do you find that companies are struggling to find the right use case for something like that?
Yeah, I think that's right. Use case discussions come very often, but I always, in my humble opinion, steer away from that. Because the second you enter into a discussion of, hey, like, what are the agentic AI use cases? Where can I plug this in? How can I make more money or save handle time in my call center? It's like you have a bunch of hammers and you're looking for a nail. So a lot of the efforts that we try to structure is not being use case first, but rather being journey first. So we try to go either across a domain or do it cross-divisional to assess where are these workflows and journeys that would be most primed for agentic solutions, right? Because that also, by the way, enables you to reuse a lot of the components shall you decide to build, or even like a playbook, up model adjustments, right? It can all apply to many more places. So you get economies of scale as you deploy into the first place.
Right.
Well, we try to go into the journey view, decompose it a little bit to see where we would apply agentic solutions. You'd benchmark a little bit of this performance to see what the art of the possible even here is, because certain workflows, certain journeys, there is not much juice there to squeeze. Or you can apply other automation technologies, right, that are cheaper, that are just as fast, and you may not necessarily even need agentic solutions for it. So that's kind of how we've been approaching things. And it also helps to assure value, because now you know exactly where you're going to go. And it comes with the redesign, not just the journey, but also the process and the workflow redesign. And you can do it in a whole bunch of ways, depending on your appetite. You can either do just a simple plug and play here and there to optimize the existing legacy workflows, or you can go into something like a full agentic zero-based redesign where you just take the existing workflow, put it to the side, redesign the new one with AI agents first and then humans second. And now you're really getting into like the 50 to 60% productivity improvements if it's the rightly selected workflow.
Right. Right. So, Damien, you mentioned that you don't believe the march through AI maturity follows a linear path, although that is a prevailing view. What do you think is a better way to think about it or to approach it?
Yeah, the AI maturity staircase narrative is very persistent, very easy for folks to understand, but I think it carries a lot of risks, and here's why. One, I think that this whole simplification really does not do us any favor because it's really messy on the inside in most cases.
Right.
It's not a simple thing like, oh, AI agent Jimmy gonna come in and handle everything. It's really deep and it's really complicated. And we have academia and experts focusing just on one of a 20th component within a architecture that enables all of this to work. And that's their life's work. So
Right.
like, it's not as simple as people think. And I don't think it really enables leaders to apply it properly. So that's one. It gives this illusion of ordered progress, but it's really just a different composition of these models and architectures. I think it also misaligns the investments. So many teams or our clients may chase these shiny demos and user interfaces, and now voice to voice come in, and ultimately agent to agent communication, when the real bottlenecks tend to be still data quality, orchestration of these agents, integration into legacy systems. So again, a different flavor. And the third I would say is it kind of masks this whole maturity plateau. So as you hit diminishing returns after like early success because you're solving an interface problem, you're not really designing your, I would call them problems, or because that could be a workflow, that could be an app model. You're not designing it for the agentic future for you to enable a rapid, simple deployment of these agentic solutions.
Yeah.
So you're kind of plugging it in still. It's an interface. You know, if I'm all on Salesforce, I'm going to take the Salesforce agents or SAP or whatnot. But how does that enable this organization to adjust ways of working, resolve and upgrade roles and responsibilities, change performance management and personalized reporting and all of those governance things for AI agents, and then create agent ops, agent factories for that to continue moving forward in an accelerated manner. So those are like some reactions to this whole staircase part.
Right. Okay. Well, in your article, you use this term composable intelligence. Could you maybe expand on that, break it down for people that aren't familiar with it, and then maybe explain how that's better than the typical agent style implementation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll caveat that it will also depend whether you're going to build or buy. If you build, a lot of this composable intelligence, you need to figure out. If you buy, certain elements come as fixed. You still need to understand them to see where you could potentially make tweaks or adjustments, but you kind of just get it. So I would define composable intelligence as a modular assembly of models, rules, APIs, workflows, architectures tailored to a specific business outcome. Not a persona or interface. It has to be some sort of an outcome that we're solving for, which is this whole agency definition in a way, right? It would optimize for functions, not for like interface or format. So you can mix large language models, any sort of models. And we're producing, the US went and produced 40 models last year, I think. We're still the top producing country of models, and it's all coming from industry. But you can mix and match a lot of those. You can mix and match the rules, the orchestration frameworks, the pipelines, the deterministic components to meet your specific domain needs. So that all is a composition and tied by a single architecture, as opposed to, yes, you get this stack from this tool, all it knows is this, and it can execute one of three things.
You also said in the article, and I think this is related to this whole idea of composable intelligence, but you wrote that agentic AI is not something you build, it's something you enable. And I thought that was an interesting comment. Could you unpack that for us and explain how that relates to what you just described about composable intelligence?
Yeah, it basically it builds it. You ordered the questions in a very nice way. So essentially, you just build off of that. So agentic behavior essentially emerges from the architecture,
Hmm.
and whether you build or buy, it's the architecture that you have and the composition of these models. So planning, memory, reasoning, action, when the system is composed to support a lot of these capabilities. So wrappers don't necessarily mean they're like reasoning. So most agents today that are being shipped are just LLMs with personas and anthropomorphosis in a way. But true agents require a lot more. So that's why looking behind the scenes, under the hood, whatever you call it, of
Yep.
what are the models, tools, what's the feedback, what's the sense of environment is, I think,
Hmm.
really critical to understand like what is that true agency there. And the biggest part is you need to enable these architecture and these models from an organizational change lens. So you integrate it into these workflows. So you still need to redesign it depending on the type of agentic solution, like we talked in the beginning, depending on the outcome, depending on the size of the prize. You redesign the processes and the workflows, often still with some sort of a human in the loop process, because it's not just about that new UX or UI, it's about embedding it where the critical work happens that agentic solutions are best primed for, and you assess the decisions that it's going to make. So you
Hmm.
don't lose money, so you don't put your organization at reputational risk and whatnot. Do we have the right set of documents, knowledge in the right format? Is the data cleaned? Do we have access to the systems, right? So this is the enabling embedding. And then you need to adjust everything else around it. So to the earlier point we talked about is the operating model is still a huge missing piece that a lot of folks don't think about. It's not a tech problem. It's a
Hmm.
business problem at
Right.
the end of the day. And especially as these AI agents or these architectures are able to take autonomous action without the human in the loop even, the design becomes critical. And you need to think about, how do I change my roles and responsibilities? There's going to be new roles created. So it's just
Right.
like in any other technological advancements that we've had. Some roles will be retired, some roles will emerge, like an agent ops person. The same thing goes with performance management, both for the digital labor, because you're kind of building a digital labor force in a way. But you
Hmm.
also need to adjust performance for the humans because their work fundamentally changes and they should be accountable and responsible for different things. Your structure will adjust. So each AI agent will ultimately need like supervisors. So you'll need somebody from the tech side, like a tech accountable owner. You need somebody from the business side to surface a lot of the activities, issues, tuning that this agent would need. You also need somebody from agent ops to
Hmm.
modify and tune that agent ultimately. So it's a new emerging three in a box model. Also, that's coming up. So those are like all of the enablers and all of the components that need to happen to enable true agency, as opposed to plug and play and
Hmm.
letting a whole bunch of agents, quote unquote, run around and do a bunch of good, because still it's just models and architectures. It's not a human. So
Right.
it will
Right.
ultimately do whatever it's told to do.
All those things you mentioned that are hindering agentic success, the organizational aspect that maybe leaders are not paying as much attention to, not just how do we use these agents and do it safely and securely and effectively, but what's the impact on our workforce? One other thing that I seem to keep hearing is this idea that we need to prepare our workforce to manage and work alongside agents. That's something that I wonder if most companies are really mindful of and thinking about as they build these new strategies. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's just really early. No, we're talking about it because the technological advancement enables us to talk about it, right? And
Hmm.
what I mean by that even then is the models that we benchmark, all
Hmm.
hundreds of them, right, are surpassing the human level, right? And
Right.
in its own specific path. So because these models surpass the that benchmark, this enables us to talk about this whole digital labor as as a realistic thing. But the reality is majority of organizations are still deploying generative solutions. They're piloting co-pilots, right? Simple productivity tools, which is in a way just cost of doing business it may not lead to 50% productivity improvement from any sort of co-pilot because you're not
Mhm.
necessarily redesigning how the work is done. But if you don't use it, you're going to get outcompeted by a company that does use it because they're going to be marginally better, right, at everything.
Mhm.
So it's just like, that's why we say it's the cost of doing business. But ultimately, by the time we get to agent economies and agent swarms, where the MCP protocols become standardized and widely applicable, same or A to A for that matter, it's going to be at least 2-3 years, I would imagine, minimum, before we
Mhm.
get to the early deployments of these things. We're going to start with
Right.
single plugins into the, workflows and legacies. And, you know, that's my perspective, at least.
Yeah. Damian, talk about what you think needs to change in the cross-functional collaboration element of this. I still see a lot of segmentation between the different groups that all have a role in this. And I'm not just talking about IT versus the data scientists versus operations. Even the automation teams still seem to be largely separate from the AI teams. And then you still have teams in many large companies focused on continuous improvement and re-engineering. How, what needs to really dramatically change in that scenario to really bring this to life the right way?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me start with maybe saying the three pain points that we've been seeing in the last couple of months. And I don't think those will come as a surprise to you. And then
Mhm.
what are some of the cross-functional collaboration plays? So the single most important pain point that still persists today is siloed decision making and disconnect between technical and business teams. So this whole tech ops, compliance, product still tend to work in isolation. And by the way, it's an issue that's not easy to solve. Right, bringing
Mhm.
everybody together and playing nice in the sandbox. So this whole cross-functional squad with shared accountability is essential, but it's still the big pain point. The
Right.
second one is lack of incentive alignment across teams for
Mhm.
deploying a lot of these, and lack of that fundamental workflow redesign,
Mhm.
depending on the level that you go. So breaking these processes, reimagining them, it's still not there alongside the op model and everything else we talked about. And then
Mhm.
the third is still there's a big over index on pilots. I don't want to quote the wrong number, but I would even go so far to say 80% of a lot of these things start and die in pilots, and it's a pilot
Mhm.
purgatory, or a limbo, if you will.
Right.
So I think, having said that, and some of these things, how does this whole cross-functional collaboration change in order for us to overcome this? So if we take the lens of this composable AI, then that means you will need composable teams.
Mhm.
So you will need domain experts. You'll need data scientists. You'll need engineers to scope the right architecture, the right set of models to solve the problems that they have. So it's
Mhm.
still a squad or a pod kind of a way, but I think there's a little fine tunes that you apply to it so it enables this true agentic transformation. I think the other thing is to break this entire let's like build and throw over the wall pattern. So
Mhm.
like I would build and here, take it, and good luck. I think these teams need to co-own the design, deployment, evolution of these agentic systems. I think that would put, whether it's the IT, the chief IT officer, or chief AI officer, depending on what the org has,
Mhm.
more embedded into the business. It's just going to become much more closely integrated as a lot of these AI agents become, because when you think about it, these agents may still be owned in a way by IT through whether it's a license of models or a license of the off-the-shelf tool, and it's operating within the business environment, working directly with the humans in that domain, in that business. You just need to figure out that structural model of what is the future role of the IT department given this is happening. So there's
Mhm.
going to be some sort of an integration, some sort of an embedded structure that happens. Um, and I think there's going to be a couple of new departments I would call, or operations in a way, where we talked a little bit about this whole concept of agent factory, agent ops, that
Mhm.
are accountable, like a mini center of excellence that's also operating, spinning these agents up, fine tuning, also kind of creating this connection between the IT and the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked what Jensen said in one of his podcasts, is that the future of the IT department is ultimately going to be the HR department for digital labor. And I think that's the world that we're going to head to, not next year, not the year after, but maybe 3 years forward. And then maybe the last part that has been kind of in my mind is, as you move from the function-based roles to like capability-based, like the pod structure, you'll need to fuse a lot of these teams to meet that composable architecture of agentic solutions. So you need an orchestrator, a monitor, like a domain steward of some sorts. So the roles also will change.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Reacting to something you said there about POC wasteland or silent purgatory, I agree with you on that. I see too much of that, and too little of it goes all the way to bright. Maybe one last question for you. How does McKinsey help executives who are used to seeing tangible demos to understand the value of something, especially something new and innovative like agentic AI or generative AI? How do you help them get to that point without getting them into some POC or demo that's just going to, circle around for weeks, if not months, and never really go anywhere?
Yeah. So we just help solve problems. We don't take sides like you need these 5 AI agents, or you need to build and we're going to build with you. We help do what's right for the company. And ultimately it starts with a level of commitment from leadership into, do we want to be an AI enabled company and move into this world, or do we want to sit and wait? And by the way, if that's a problem, then we'll solve that first and then we'll proceed forward. But assuming like all of that is out of the way and we're on a pathway to start on this agentic journey, we'll always start to simulate real journeys, not some polished demos. So we'll see and create a current and future state, like how to process claims, how to make loan decisions, what is the implications there. So we start with just assessing and understanding where these value pools are, what is the risk element, and whether agentic AI is the right solution for this workflow, for this task. So we start with a lot of this. We also tend to couple that with just a little bit of strategy, because I do believe fundamentally, whether you go build or buy or partner or bolt or fork or extend, you still need to solve for long-term benefits. And ultimately that benefit could be you have modular reusable components of the agentic architecture that you can plug into new use cases that, you evolve down the road, which accelerates your time to build, and you own all the IP, it puts you in control. So there's one pathway. If you go into the, let's say, build pathway, a buy pathway, and you're like all on Salesforce and it makes sense to go with Agentforce, great. You'll have ready to go playbooks and deployment pathways and structural op model implications, workforce adjustments, and you can apply that to the next and the next and the next domain as well. So it's that strategy piece really helps to de-risk, value assure, and accelerate future state deployments as well. So it's like down the road play. We always overemphasize on the business case, because we say don't AI the wrong thing in a way. If you don't need to use agents for this and the ROI is not there, don't chase autonomy where you may not need the reasoning capabilities that are getting cheaper, but they're still more expensive than other types of automation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting us take a peek inside the brain of a McKinsey consultant working with companies, trying to figure all this out. I think just taking it from a strategic point of view, it's not a technical play. It's not just about how do you use technology in the best manner. It's about solving real problems the right way with the right solution. So I definitely appreciate that kind of perspective that you guys take with your clients. Damian, it's been a pleasure having you back on. Thank you for rejoining the podcast and talking agentic with us. The next time I have you on, there'll probably be a totally new flavor of AI that
I'll send my AI agent instead of me.
Doesn't even exist right now. But we'll just catch each wave as they come and wash ashore, and I'll have you on to help us put our brains right about it. But Thank you for being on. It was good to see you again, and I wish you the very best.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of enterprise AI, subscribe now. The future of work is here.